I'm here with Pastor John Hamilton of Bethany Presbyterian Church, and I'm going to talk to him about his experiences and travels to Kenya. So thank you for taking the time to meet with me, and I hope you can shed a little bit more light on the issues I've been researching for my senior project. So I wanted to start off by asking you, when you traveled to Kenya, obviously as a person who came from a developed nation such as the U.S., did it come as a culture shock to you?
Yes, it did. I've been to Kenya 4 times for about 3-week blocks each time, including the travel time, all under the auspices of Presbyterian Church and our Presbyterian. And the first time in particular, what really helped was a months-long preparation time. And that was just very, very important to just get really grounded and to have understanding from those who had already been there and describing the culture shock. Then the other thing that helps is just in the preparations, you know that, for example, you have to take hand sanitizer with you everywhere. You don't eat anything that you can't boil, peel, or there's one or cook thoroughly through. Bottled water only unless it is boiled for tea and coffee. And then all the medical preparations, something called malarium, or some form of anti-malarial medicines or shots that you get, pills that you get. So even in the build-up, you kind of get ready for this is going to be different, but nothing quite prepares you for it. And then finally you get there. I got there, and yeah.
What was the first thing you noticed when you got there? Like, did anything, like the terrain, the development, the buildings, anything like that?
Yeah, couple things. One was the airport. Jomo Kenyatta Airport in Nairobi, Kenya, is one of the main airports in Northeast Africa, East Africa. So it's considered a very important airport. But compared to the other, compared to what we're used to, it was very interesting. For example, the heat, no air conditioning. You just walk in and it's just steamy hot. The smells, you can smell body smells, just simple as that. You smell earthy smells rather than, what you might smell in one of our airports. And then, now remember, this is the first time I went over was pre-9/11. I don't want to say folksiness, but I'll just say it that way to get the word across. For example, first time we went there, I looked out at where they would really check you over, check your bags, pat you down and do all that. And I saw this group of men in collars, and they were talking to the customs people and to the security people there. And they were the people ready to welcome us. And the next thing, the security people just said to all of us, "Come on through." And we came on through. They didn't I think we showed our passports, and they stamped that. They have to do that. But they didn't check our luggage. They didn't pat us down. They didn't do anything because they knew the pastors knew them, and they said, "That's our group." So those were 3 examples. Obviously, the terrain is radically different. It was dusty and dry and Spartan, and the roads at first were okay, and then pretty soon you get on, even in the city, some roads with massive potholes, places where one lane has to stop while the people coming the other way, go. I think there were traffic lights, but people didn't necessarily obey them. So lots and lots of culture shock. Biggest culture shock was returning home.
So how far behind us, would you say, with development? Are they like technology, or they have internet access there, or with electricity, anything like that?
Kenya would have the whole range. There are certainly, there's some major corporations who operate out of Kenya. It has a skyline in Nairobi that's pretty impressive. So there is internet there. There are TVs. Some people have a disc for their TV. They did when I was there last. But then that's for, I would say, corporations, banks, and the more economically prosperous, which would be, I'm sure, less than 1%. Yeah. Then, in terms of the infrastructure, absolutely, it's infrastructure is a massive, massive problem. Roads, once you get out of the cities, and even in the city of Nairobi, which is about 4 million, 3 million, the traffic is a horrendous problem. Rush hour is just totally chaotic. Roads are bad, and then once outside of the cities, you just don't know what you're going to get into. You could have a road that's pretty decent, and then you can have roads that are just really, really, really difficult and hazardous. People outside the cities would not have internet access. Some would go to internet cafes and pay a few shillings and spend some time there. Most people who had cell phones did the thing where you rented it. You went in and paid it, got so much time on it. And although some did, in fact, when I was there last time, that was a big boom. Every pastor had a cell phone, and man, that was like a child with a toy. Telephone system, they do have that, but it is very expensive out of country, almost impossible to call. So it's quite a range. They have what we have, but it would be just a very few people, and mostly banks and corporations that would have some of the things we have. Infrastructure is massive: plumbing, electricity, highways, communications. That is a huge, huge struggle for folks.
So you definitely saw that wide disparity between the rich and the poor.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So how would you say, like the daily life of most Kenyans? Is it a lot different from ours?
Again, it would depend on the Kenyan.
Yeah.
The short answer is yes, it'd be very different. But like I stayed with a doctor and family, and his wife was a teacher. They had a very nice home, pretty prosperous. He worked at the local hospital. He went to the hospital, had a crazy, hectic doctor's type day, came home, usually checked the evening news, went to bed, had breakfast. So it sounds kind of like us, Dr. Kachuyu. But then other folks, the massive majority of folks, it wouldn't be like that. I forget what the unemployment rate is, but it's very high. So you'd have people who just don't have work. You'd have a lot of people that would just take their produce and go out and sell it on the highway, sell it on the roads and in the markets. Just get whatever they can. You would have other people who would be craftsmen. This shirt and some other clothing I have from Kenya, well, this one wasn't made by this man, but some of my other Kenyan clothing was made by a tailor. He had a little shop out in a tiny town. All he could afford was a motorbike, not a motorcycle, but one of those little kind of putt-putt motorbikes. He and his wife, Boniface, and his wife, Margaret, had the shop. It had just an opening in the shop. I'm sure he had something to pull down and lock, but it didn't have like a door with glass. Not too many people had glass. It was just open. And he had doors and windows, and it was opening so the dust would be everywhere. He had a shop, and he worked in the shop, and then he peddled his wares. And would, in our case, would motor into the city about 2.5 hours away, meet us, measure us up, have us pick out the material we wanted, and then 2 weeks later bring back our orders and we pay them. So it really would depend on the folks. The people that in the churches that I hung out with, most of them were either in service industries like education or medicine, or they were merchants of some sort, had a little shop.
Did you learn a lot about the education in Kenya?
Some. I certainly am not an authority on their education, but I do know that, in fact, about 6 years ago, the Assembly passed a law to say that there will be education available for every child in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how well they're doing that, but that's what they are doing. So they're big on education, and then if you can't afford it, and this would even be for middle class people, once your child is even out of the grade school level, what we would call the grade school level, the big thing was to try to get them into a boarding school. And even middle class people would save up all their money and try to get their child into a live-in boarding school because they knew that was, where they would get a proper education.
So you're definitely making efforts.
Oh, big time.
Society, yeah.
I saw that anyway, literacy rate was reported as 85%. That's pretty darn good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
For African nation, that's probably
Very
nice.
good. Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to touch a little bit on the actual rights of Kenyans, and do you think that they are afforded many of the same rights that we as United States citizens are?
Yes and no. It's a mixed answer, kind of like that one picture where you're not sure which angle you're looking at. In some ways, yes, because they're a parliamentary democracy, much